Missing persons cases that we discuss on this channel oftentimes don't have the ending that we could all hope for. It seems increasingly unlikely for those that go missing to be found with each passing year. However, in some such cases, decades later, missing individuals were found alive and well. Here are 5 such cases, some of which seem almost unbelievable. Number 5. Rachael L Kyle was just 16 years old when she vanished from her home in 1947. She'd allegedly been deeply in love with an Arabic man, and the two of them had secretly eloped. However, years later, her husband was killed by a sniper. The husband's family then insisted that Rachael come with them to Syria to marry another one of their sons. Strangely enough, Rachael agreed. She remained in this unhappy marriage for decades with no way to get back home. She attempted to write her family several times, but the letters never made it back. As far as her family knew, Rachael had been kidnapped, or worse, and was never going to return home. However, many years later, a grandchild of Rachael's happened to travel to London through the Israeli embassy and solve the family mystery that had been continuing on for over 60 years. The grandson traveled to the embassy and told a worker that his grandmother was in Syria, but that she was actually an Israeli Jew from Haifa. The embassy did a bit of digging, and later on, one of Rachael's siblings received a phone call. Rachael was then flown to an Israeli airport, where she awaited the arrival of her family. She arrived back home, and her brother, who was only a toddler when she disappeared, took her on a tour of the local area to get her reacclimated to the city. She then visited her parents' graves, with her trip ending with the sight she wanted to see the most, the Mediterranean coast, with Syria being seen just in the distance. According to those close to her, back in the 60s and 70s, she would find her way to this coastline, though on the Syria side of the water, and secretly listen to an Israeli radio station. The exact details of Rachael's time in Syria remain only known to family members, but her life in Syria seems certainly less than ideal. It's unknown whether or not she has any additional family remaining in Syria, or if she ever bore a Syrian child. As far as Rachael is concerned though, her life in Syria is over. She's now re-registered as an Israeli citizen and has been granted an Israeli ID card. Number 4. Back in 1970, Grace Kivisto's mother and family had a heated argument that led to her mother leaving the family, never to be seen again. Later on, a body was found in Illinois that was believed to have been hers, and the family accepted this news as truth, and their memories of her were laid to rest. However, 15 years after this body was discovered, police reopened the case after they were made aware of an 84-year-old woman named Lula Hood, who lived about 1,100 miles away. Grace was informed of this, and she reportedly simply started crying. Grace stated, "As a kid, all you see is that your mother left. Then you realize it was because she couldn't take care of us. So I was excited. I never would have thought I would have had that reaction, but I did." Lula is known to have suffered from mental illness in the years since she left, but was still well enough to return home. Police say that Sergeant Jason Landers was the one to conduct an interview with Lula, and was shocked when a native woman answered the phone and was able to answer his questions accurately and correctly, confirming her identity. Sergeant Landers said, "When I said I was from Knox County, she said she knew where that was, and gave me the names of 2 of her sisters and daughter. I feel good for the family." Lula, at the time of her disappearance, was a single mother who realized that she couldn't take care of her kids appropriately, and because of this, she allowed her sister Hazel to adopt them, but regularly visited them until that fateful 1970 argument that led her astray. According to her daughter, who was 15 when she left, she didn't know exactly what the argument was about. All she could recall is that her mother was told to leave, and that's exactly what she did, never coming home again. The family searched tirelessly for her afterward, but never found her. In 1996, the aforementioned body was located near a brickyard and was presumably Lula. The family held a memorial service for her, though police held on to the remains of the woman until they could confirm her identity with DNA. It wasn't until 2008, 12 years later, that the remains were confirmed to not belong to Lula. It took police several more years of searching, but eventually an online database led them to a woman named Lula, though she had a different last name. The sheriff's office called and confirmed the woman's social security number, and the woman was confirmed to have been Lula Hood. Police say that they're extremely grateful to have found her, but that only half of the case has been solved. They still need to determine who the unknown bones belong to. Number 3. A woman from Germany known as Petra was just 24 years old and a computer science student when she unexpectedly went missing in 1984. She was reported to police after she failed to show up for her brother's birthday and for school. A manhunt was declared and police searched for her nationwide. Her body was never found, but she was declared dead in 1989. This was after detectives working the case turned to a local German crime series for help, and it was determined that she likely lost her life to a male suspect who claimed guilt in her disappearance. However, years later, he recanted his confession. Petra remained missing for 31 years but was found living in Dusseldorf, with no official documents on hand, living under the pseudonym of Mrs. Snyder. At the age of 55, she was discovered after she phoned police to report a burglary in her home. She presented herself as Mrs. Snyder, but after police pressed her for further identification, she confessed her real name. It was confirmed by detectives that she'd been alive and well, living in several major cities, but never once informing her family that she was still alive. Her brother and mother allegedly cried in shock when they learned that she was still alive, and during her disappearance, police confirmed that she took several steps to ensure that she would never be found. She also didn't hold a bank account, but rather paid all of her bills in cash. She told police that she didn't want to contact her family and that she'd allegedly been making a small living doing some sort of illegal work, though the specifics of this remain unknown. She also refused to inform officers about why she left in the first place. Police say that even through all of this, she's not committed a confirmed criminal offense. Police plan to respect her wishes of not wanting to be contacted by family, but she's being required to register with authorities as alive and well. Her family requested that police deliver a letter to her, but this is believed to be the only contact she's ever had with them since her disappearance. No modern photos or information about her have been released, and it seems unlikely that they ever will be. Number 2. A 24-year-old man was discovered living in Minnesota after he was found living under a fake name that was given to him by his grandparents nearly 2 decades ago. According to police, Richard Wayne Landers has lived with his grandparents since birth. However, in July of 1994, after a conflict arose between the grandparents and the boy's mother, the grandparents took the boy and fled. It was revealed that at the time of his disappearance, his mother was unemployed and living in her car. Even though the grandparents claimed to have registered custody of the boy, they can now face federal charges for their actions. A detective claims that they were not legally entitled to the custody of him, and said that what Richard's grandparents did was wrong, but entirely understandable. He says that he never believes the child was in any danger while in their care. Police say that the boy's stepfather did not return phone calls that were made informing him of the boy's discovery, and a phone number for his mother could not be found. A home listing could not be found for his biological father, and others who were close to Richard declined to be interviewed, and his grandparents were charged immediately for child abduction and interference of custody, which is a felony. Later on, Richard's stepmother was located, who then contacted Richard's biological father. The two were extremely excited to have Richard return, with police saying that Richard's father just recently remarried and the two are expecting their first child. Number 1. Carlos Salazar was an extremely impressive and well-respected man. He was both a doctor and psychologist, with most of those that knew him holding him in very high regards. However, in 1996, Carlos's life changed in a way that no one could have predicted. He went missing, leaving behind not a single trace. The doctor from Spain had allegedly been dealing with depression and saw no escape other than to flee and seek out a new life. For over 14 years, no one had any idea where he was, and his family even registered him on the list of individuals who went missing and are presumed to have passed away. Though in 2015, a group of mushroom hunters from Italy stumbled upon a large amount of trash in a Tuscany forest. As they continued searching, the trash grew more and more dense, eventually leading them to a small tent. Inside of this tent was a filthy old man with a crazy beard. He was surrounded by bottles of water and empty canisters. The hunters became afraid and ran away, eventually finding a forest ranger and alerting him to what they had discovered. The man happily greeted the ranger and explained to him that he was Carlos Salazar, and even still had his old ID to prove it. In a strange turn of events for his family, it turned out that Carlos had not passed away or been kidnapped, but rather was just hiding out in the woods for all this time. He stated that he no longer wished for human contact, and since he had now been discovered, he needed to relocate. The two hunters managed to get a photograph of his ID though before he wandered back off into the wilderness. They shared the image with his family and reignited their hope for his return. His mother stated that all she wished was to see him for half an hour to get some sort of closure. However, Carlos was already long gone by the time they could return to the campsite, and he's never been seen again. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos. And if you enjoyed this narration, maybe consider checking out my personal channel at youtube.com/ty_knots.